Today we are going to start with the very first chapter of civics, which is the Indian Constitution. So you are familiar with the Indian Constitution as you have read about it in class 6th and class 7th also. But in this class, in this unit, we are going to study about the Indian Constitution in detail. How was it framed? What what is in it, and how many members were there who framed the Indian Constitution, what was the process, how many days it took, etc. Okay, so we'll be beginning with few stories which will help you to understand about the Constitution. So in this chapter we are going to begin with the football, a game many of you have probably heard of or even played, and as many of you are sports persons in the class, as the name suggests, this is a game that involves the player's feet. According to the rules of football, if the ball touches the arm of any player except the goalkeeper, then this is considered a foul. So, if players start holding the football in their hands and passing it around, then they are not playing football anymore. Similarly, in other games such as hockey or cricket, also have rules according to which they are played. Each of these rules helps define the game and helps us distinguish one game from another. As these are fundamental to the game, we can also call them as the constitutive rules of the game. What can we call these rules? As constitutive rules of the game. Like these games, a society has constitutive rules that make it what it is and differentiate it from other kinds of societies. So girls, I believe this is a very example for all of you to understand this constitution very well. Like you all play a number of games and you see that in all the games there are specific rules which you have to follow to play that game. Similarly, if you want to live in a society, there are specific rules which you have to follow to live with harmony in that society. Now, in large societies in which different communities of people live together, these rules are formulated through consensus, and in modern countries, this consensus is usually available in written form, and a written document in which we find such rules is known as constitution. Okay, so we have looked at the Constitution of India in classes 6 and 7 in our social and political life textbooks. So have you wondered that why do we need a constitution, or been curious at how the constitution got written or who wrote it? So we read a few little bits about this thing, but we never read it in detail. In this chapter, we will discuss both these issues and also look at the key features of the Indian Constitution. Each of these features is crucial to the working of democracy in India, and some of these will be focus of different chapters in this book. Why do we in India need a constitution? Before going ahead with that, I'd like to explain this image. So in 1934, you can see this image. Okay, and this image kind of reminds you of the parliament. So in 1934, the Indian National Congress made the demand of a constituent assembly. During the Second World War, this assertion for an independent constituent assembly formed only of Indians gained momentum, and this was convened in 1946, which means that when this demand was kept, so this was given some importance during the Second World War, and later in December 1946 this was given convent. The photo on page number 2 shows some members of the Constituent Assembly between December 1946 and November 1949. The Constituent Assembly drafted the constitution for independent India. So you can see that from 1946 to 1949, these many years it took for the Constituent Assembly to form the Constitution of India, free to shape their destiny at last after 150 years of British rule. The members of the Constituent Assembly approached this task with the great idealism that freedom struggle had helped produce. You will read about the work of the Constituent Assembly later in the chapter, and the photo alongside shows Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru addressing the Constituent Assembly. Okay, So these all are the members of the Constituent Assembly, and here Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru is addressing all of them. Now, today most countries in the world have a constitution. While all democratic countries are likely to have a constitution, it is not necessary that all the countries that have a constitution are democratic. So this is a very important thing which you girls should notice, that all democratic countries have a constitution, but it is not necessary that all the countries which have a constitution are democratic. Okay, so the constitution serves several purposes. Okay, we will read one by one what are the purposes served by the constitution or how the constitution helps the nation. So first of all, it lays out certain ideals that form the basis of the country that we as citizens aspire to live in. Okay, so first of all, the major function of the constitution to lay out a basic structure or a basis for the kind of country that we as citizens want to live in. For example, we would like to live in a country where we have freedom, liberty, and there is no inequality. We live in a secular country, etc. So the terms which I have used, secular, sovereignty, we'll discuss these terms one by one later in the chapter. So, or put another way, the constitution tells what the fundamental nature of a society is, which means how our society should be, whether we should be respecting the others in our society or not, whether our society has to be a majoritarian society, etc. Now, a country is usually made up of different communities of people who share certain beliefs but may not necessarily agree on all issues. Like India, we live in a country where we all have different religious beliefs, we all belong to different castes, and it is very common that it is not necessary that we all should agree to one thing. Now, how to run a country like that? A constitution helps to serve as a set of rules and principles that all persons in a country can agree upon as the basis of the way in which they want the country to be governed. So our constitution gives us a basis, a basic set of rules on which all the citizens of the country agree, and they want the country to be governed in such a manner. And this includes not only the type of government but also an agreement on certain ideals that they all believe the country should uphold. Okay, so it is not only about the way the government should run it, but it is also about the ideals which all the citizens of the country should follow. So whatever I taught you just now, I am going to explain the same with the examples of two contrasting situations. Okay, so here you can see two pictures, and the country of Nepal has witnessed several people's struggle for democracy. There was people's struggle in 1990 that established democracy that lasted for 12 years until 2002. In October 2002, King Gyanendra, citing the Maoist uprising in the countryside as his reason, began taking over different aspects of the government with the army's assistance. And the king then finally took over as the head of the government in February 2005, and in November 2005, the Maoists joined other political parties to sign a 12-point agreement, and this agreement signaled to the larger public an imminent return to democracy and peace. In 2006, this People's Movement for Democracy began gaining immense force. It repeatedly refused the small concessions that the king made, and finally in April 2006, the king restored the third parliament and asked the political parties to form a government. And in 2008, Nepal became a democracy after abolishing the monarchy. The above photos show scenes from the People's Movement for Democracy in 2006. So here you can see when the king took the took the seat of the head of the state, and the king tried to establish monarchy again in a country which has witnessed democracy for 12 years. How the people revolted and did their best to restore democracy in their country. So we'll just try and understand what we mean by this through two contrasting situations in the recent history of Nepal, a country that borders India on the north. So until recently, Nepal was a monarchy. Okay, so it's just about few years ago that Nepal was not a democracy and it was a monarchy. The previous constitution of Nepal, which had been adopted in 1990, reflected that the final authority rested with the king. Like we say in our country's constitution, it is mentioned that the final authority rests with the people or the people's representative. But here in the constitution of Nepal, the final authority rested with the king. A people's movement in Nepal fought for several decades to establish democracy, and in 2006 they finally succeeded in putting an end to the powers of the king. The people had to write a new constitution to establish Nepal as a democracy, and the reason that they did not want to continue with the previous constitution is because it did not reflect the ideals of the country that they want Nepal to be and that they fought for. Like you can just correlate it with it. Just in the previous topic, I taught you that a constitution states the very first purpose of the constitution is to set some rules of a country which we want to live in, to frame a basis of the country which we want to live in. Okay, so this is the reason why the people of Nepal had to reframe their constitution, because the older constitution did not reflect the ideals of the country like the way they wanted it to be. So as in the game of football, in which a change in the constitutive rules will change the game altogether. You can relate to it with it again, that if you change few rules of your game, the entire game will change. Okay, now Nepal, by moving from a monarchy to a democratic government, needs to change all its constitutive rules in order to usher in a new society. This is why the people of Nepal adopted a new constitution for the country in 2015. The caption alongside elaborates Nepal's struggle for democracy, and the second important purpose of the constitution is to define the nature of a country's political system. This we'll read later.